that was when the big tech bubble burst. And so I had this amazing set of stock that on paper was worth about $1 million when I was 28 years old, COVID stock. And in one day, that $1 million went down to $20,000.
Behind every funding announcement is a founder whose journey, decisions, setbacks, and breakthroughs are rarely documented in a way that others can learn from. The First 200 is a media platform and founder network documenting entrepreneurs from distinct backgrounds who have raised more than $1 million in venture capital funding. Our inaugural cohort focuses on the first 200 Black women founders in the United States to raise more than $1 million in a single venture round. This episode of The First 200 is sponsored by The Folklore. The Folklore is a technology platform that helps fashion, beauty, home, and lifestyle brands sell better and market smarter. With just one click, brands can launch and sell products across leading retailers and marketplaces like Nordstrom, Macy's, Urban Outfitters, and Mathis Home. Our AI-powered tools help brands create better product images, videos, titles, and descriptions that improve visibility and drive more sales online. Start your free 7-day trial today at thefolklore.com. Today's guest is Tanya Van Court, founder and CEO of Goalsetter, the family financial education platform helping children and their families build lifelong financial literacy. Tanya has raised more than $30 million in venture capital funding for Goalsetter and attracted backing from NBA legends Carmelo Anthony and Chris Paul. In this episode, Tanya shares her insights on building a mission-driven fintech company, raising venture capital, and why Black women founders are uniquely positioned to reshape financial services. Hi, Tanya. How are you?
I'm doing well, Amira. Thank you for having me here.
Well, welcome to the First 200. And I am super excited to have you here because you are like all things financial literacy, especially when it comes to kids and families. And my niece, who's like 11 now, everything she says to me is like, can I have this or can I? I'm like, girl, can you save something? So I'm going to take a lot of what we have from this conversation and go talk to her about it after this.
Listen, fantastic. And if you want me to talk to her, I'm happy to do so too.
Please, somebody got to do it. And, you know, you've done amazing things in your career as a marketer and, you know, leading product at some amazing media corporations. But I really want to focus this conversation on you being the founder and CEO of Goalsetter. And it's the company that helps with financial literacy for young children as well as families. And you've raised $30 million for the company. And you're now, I think, in 10 states, or is it more than that now? 10 states.
Yep.
And you're really helping catapult this new generation of people to understand how to save, how to invest. And that's such an important topic right now. And so I really want to be able to understand that and how you built that business, but also how you became one of the first 200 Black women to raise over $1 million in venture capital.
Absolutely. Ooh, it was hard.
It was, I know it was. I know it was. And especially starting out as somebody who's at Stanford, and you're at Stanford in the 90s majoring in the tech space, like as an engineer.
Yes.
How did you even get there as a Black woman? And you're from Oakland.
I am.
And you were like, I'm going to go to Stanford and do engineering, which was not a thing that at the time people were doing. If anything, Black professionals were getting into finance. They're lawyers, doctors, right? How did you land there?
It's such an interesting question. And I think the beauty in the answer is that I followed in the footsteps of another Black woman. And that is so much of the story of being a founder as well, right? We follow in each other's footsteps, unwittingly or not. And so for me, when I got to Stanford, all I knew was that I was good at math, I was good at science, I was good at ELA. I was kind of good at everything across the board. And I wouldn't say that I was necessarily great at any one thing, but I was very solid in a lot of things. So I knew that about myself, right? The second thing that I knew about myself is I didn't just want to sit behind a computer and do anything all day long. I like interacting with people. And so I knew that computer science was a thing. I knew that coding was a thing. But to me, that meant that you were literally stuck in a cubicle and sitting behind a computer all day. And I didn't want that. So one of my friends who I had met in Inroads, her name is Christina Omari. Shout out to Christina.
Yeah, shout out.
I was like, I don't know what to major in. Everyone in my family is a teacher. Everyone is educators. And everybody who's a teacher says, don't go into what? Teaching, right? Whenever you have a mother and auntie, they say, don't go into education. And so I said, I don't know what to do. And she said, if you're great at math and science, you should do industrial engineering. It's kind of like a technical business degree. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And that's how I got into industrial engineering.
I love that.
No idea what it was before I set foot on Stanford's campus. And then I just followed in those footsteps of Christina Omari.
And then, so you got the degree, and because you have this degree, you're probably like, I guess I should get into tech then, right? Is that how kind of what ended up happening?
Well, what happened is I actually said, industrial engineering is how do you optimize everything within a corporation? How do you optimize their finances? How do you optimize their processes? How do you optimize their people? And a lot of it is process redesign. And so I remember I went for my first internship, and it was at a Pampers plant. And so I walked into the Pampers plant. I had on my little suit. I had on my little heels. I'm sure I had bought them specifically for this internship.
Yes.
And I came in and they were like, take those heels off and put on these steel toe boots.
Oh.
And go ahead and put on this hard hat because you are going out onto the manufacturing plant to optimize this manufacturing line. And I was like, oh, is that what industrial engineering meant? I don't think I quite got it.
Okay. I don't think I quite got it either.
Right.
We would have both been in the same boat.
Okay.
Yeah.
And our hard hats and steel toe shoes looking at each other like, what are we doing? Right? What is happening here? So that internship actually did not last very long. And then I went back to, Stanford, and I was like, I have to figure out something different to do with this industrial engineering degree. But corporate jobs were still a real possibility and an outcome for many people who majored in industrial engineering. So I started to go the corporate path, not the manufacturing path. And that's when I got into corporations. And that's when I started to see that, there was all of this technology that was underpinning not only the operations of these corporations, but certainly, their products and their customer experiences. And that became very interesting to me. And so it was really my early days at Covad Communications in Silicon Valley that made me say, wow, technology is really transforming how we live our daily lives. And that's interesting. And that's what I want to be a part of. Because Covad, not COVID, let us be clear.
Yes.
Not
with
COVID.
an A.
Exactly. Covad with an A. It was a DSL company, digital subscriber line. So it was high-speed data before the telephone companies were doing it, before the cable companies were doing it. Covad Communications was disrupting the entire technology landscape and turning out these high-speed data lines, not the old, you wouldn't even know, the old dial-up that,
I remember AOL, yeah.
Yes. And so that was really fascinating to me. So that's really when I got into tech.
And what was it like being at a startup in the 90s?
Oh, my. It was interesting because I was in Silicon Valley, which was in the backyard of Stanford. So I still had people, right? I still had people from Stanford, but they were few and far between. There were hardly any Black people in Silicon Valley at the time. Mm-hmm. So I lived in Silicon Valley in the Mountain View area for about a year. And then I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I actually bought a condo in Oakland. And so I would stay in Silicon Valley during the week. And then on the weekends, I would go live at my condo in Oakland, which was only an hour away.
Okay.
Because I was like, I need some people.
You need a little culture in it.
I need a little culture. Yeah. I need some Lake Merritt. Yep. I need all the things. Mm-hmm. And so I did that. But the other thing that was just different about Silicon Valley that wasn't attractive to me is everything was around tech. Mm-hmm. Right? Everything. And for me, that wasn't living life, right? Like I wanted to go take a salsa class. I wanted to go and listen to some reggae. I wanted to go to a Black art festival. Mm-hmm. And none of that was happening in Silicon Valley. And so it got to a point where I thought there has to be somewhere else that I can live and be happy. And the great thing about that time in my life and in my career is Covad Communications was starting an international division. And that international division was taking all of the technology and all of the processes that we had codified in the Valley and taking them overseas. And if you were working for the international division, you could live anywhere in the United States.
Okay.
And so I said, Brooklyn, here I come. So that was really liberating for me to get to work for this Silicon Valley tech company, but be in a place where I had that culture that I was missing so much.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then from there, you end up forming this huge career in the media space, like at Nickelodeon and Cablevision, and just so how did we even get there? Because now you went from a startup, Silicon Valley, you're now in New York, and now you're working for some of the biggest networks in the world.
It's interesting because when I tell you how I got there, this is absolutely one of those stories of just Black woman fortitude and grit and tenacity. So I moved out of Silicon Valley, and this was late 2000 that I moved into Brooklyn. And I was working for the international division. And then in early 2001, that was when the big tech bubble burst. And so I had this amazing set of stock that on paper was worth about $1 million when I was 28 years old, COVID stock. And in one day, that $1 million went down to $20,000.
Did you take the $20,000 out like that day?
No.
Okay.
I thought what goes down must go back up. Is that the saying? What goes down must go back up, right?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, no. And plus I was like, it's $20,000. It was $1 million. It's not even worth it for me to be taking this $20,000.
And I'd have been at the bank the next day. I want whatever's left.
I'll take it, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
So went down to $20,000. And all of the companies in the Valley just started to bleed people. They started firing. They started closing divisions. I mean, it was really like the Great Depression. And there were so many people so this was my first lesson also, by the way, in financial education. Because before that, I had gotten, I was well paid. I didn't quite know what to do with my money, but I had a lot of it. I was only supporting myself, right? You didn't have those hard lessons in financial education coming out of Stanford, getting a great job, starting a great career before that. But in this moment, I was like, wait, how come nobody ever taught me about money? And, it was really disheartening for me to realize that I got these fancy degrees from this fancy institution, but nobody had ever given me the foundation and the fundamentals of what I was supposed to do with my money when I made it. Mm. And I knew I couldn't turn back the hands of time. That $1 million wasn't coming back. I waited like a week. I waited like a month. I was like, it's time. When is it coming back? Didn't happen.
Yep.
So if you can't turn back the hands of time, all you can do is move forward. And what could I do in moving forward? I could make sure that same lesson didn't happen to me again and didn't happen to my own kids. So when I moved to Brooklyn, I was still working at Kovac Communications, but shortly thereafter, that's when the tech bubble burst. And that's when Kovac Communications shut down their entire international division, except for one person. They called me and said, "We really love you. We think you should come back to Silicon Valley and we will find you a job." And I said, "No, thank you. I'm going to try my hand in New York City."
Okay. And was that really because you didn't want to be detached from this new lifestyle that you'd created here that kind of gave you the best of both worlds?
It was scary. The reason I said no, thank you is actually because I saw the level of depression in Silicon Valley. I mean, people lost everything. They lost the home that they had bought for their mother because they had over-leveraged themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So they lost the home they bought for their mother, the home they bought for themselves, the car they bought for themselves. People were in dire financial straits, and it was a really depressing place to be. And New York wasn't experiencing that. And so I decided I'm going to stay in New York and try my hand in New York City. And so I said to myself, I am not going to work for 3 months. It was the summer. The big tech meltdown happened somewhere, I think it was around May. So I took June, July, and August off. I said, I'm going to travel. I went to Senegal. Okay. I made new friends. I traveled with old friends. It was amazing. And I said, and on September 1st, I'm going to start looking for a job again. And then September 11th happened.
Yep, I was doing the math.
Yes. I could see you doing the math. So I had fled from Silicon Valley, yes, where there were no jobs.
Yes.
and then landed in New York.
Yeah.
And 9/11 happened. And guess what? There were no jobs. And so it was quite the eventful year. And so I had a friend who was a headhunter, and I said, shout out to Tezra, Tez, what am I going to do? And she said, Tanya, find any company that you want to work at and just send their executives emails with your resume. And I said, Tez, nobody posts their email addresses on their website because they don't want me having their email address. Like, this was before LinkedIn, really. And she said, how many iterations of Tanya Van Court could there be? Tanya.vancourt, T Van Court, vancourt.t. She said, use them all. And I did.
I still do that. That's how I got your email. That's how I got your email.
Well, you did well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Even without Tezra.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so that's what I did. And that's how I started working at Cablevision, because one of the executives there sent my resume to another executive and said, I think you should look at her for your department. And that executive assumed the first one knew me.
Oh, that's always good.
It was
so
wonderful.
It's kind of like a warm intro, low key.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Literally a low key warm intro.
I love that.
So that's how I got my first job at Cablevision, and so I worked there rolling out digital cable boxes. And then I went into an executive leadership development program sponsored by NAMIC, the National Association of Multi-Ethnicity in Cable. And there I met a gentleman who worked at ESPN, and he was like, you're amazing. We should get you over to ESPN. I want to set you up with an interview with my boss. And I was like, okay, let's do it. And on the way to the interview, his boss later became the CEO of ESPN. But on the way to the interview, I realized I didn't know anything about sports.
Oh.
So I called my boyfriend and said, can you give me a really good sports story that I can share in this interview? And so that's how I got that job.
Okay.
And I stayed there for a couple of years. I launched ESPN3, which is the digital video player. It was the first digital video player in the industry to be launched before HBO Go and HBO Now and any of those. Yeah, so it was very exciting. And then I got a job from Nickelodeon. I got a call from Nickelodeon, and they said, we're looking for someone with digital experience and experience developing digital content and platforms to come and lead preschool and parenting at Nickelodeon. And I just had at ESPN my first daughter. And so, I was really in that space of being a mom and having a young one at home. So I was super excited to go to Nickelodeon. And so, yeah, that's how my media career really began.
That's an amazing story, because I always feel like you're obviously very smart, but you also created a really great community around you that those two things combined is where people are like, sometimes it's luck. No, you created luck in that way, and now you're at Nickelodeon. And I know Nickelodeon is where you kind of got the idea for Goalsetter, and also with being a parent for the first time.
Absolutely.
So what was the problem that you identified during that time that you felt like you wanted to solve?
That's a great question. So the problem that I wanted to solve was really the problem that we talked about earlier of I graduated from Stanford with 2 degrees in engineering and didn't know anything about personal finance. And that was crazy to me. And so I, had started teaching my daughter everything I could about money from the time she was born. And when she was 8, about to turn 9, she said, Mommy, for my 9th birthday, I really only want 2 things. And I said, good. What's that? Because, Lord knows you have everything. So please do tell me, what are the 2 things you want? And she said, I want enough money to save for an investment account and a bike.
And a bike.
And a bike. And I thought, well, if I can get every kid like you to say that by the ripe old age of 8, I can change the world. So that was the moment for me, right? I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. I was very comfortable and happy taking my weekly checks, taking my bonus checks, taking my other checks, right? Like any checks I could get that somebody else was going to provide me with. Yes, please.
Yes.
And thank you, right? I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. But truly in that moment, I felt like, if not me, then who? Who is going to teach these Black kids about personal finance? Who's going to do it in a way that's fun and engaging for them? Who's going to care as much as I care? And so, that was the moment where I felt like God wants me to be here and stand in this space. And so I got to go with it.
And so did you just have that light bulb moment and you were like, bye, Nickelodeon. Like, I'm about to go and create this, amazing company.
I did not, because the truth is I didn't know anything about being a startup founder. I didn't know what a seed round was, a Series A round was. I would not have been able to tell you what a venture capitalist did reliably with any degree of reliability. So no, I didn't know anything about it. And I thought, I really have to learn this. I really have to research this. And so that's what I started doing. I started, reading the books, and, I would go to panels. And I remember I went to one panel and I saw Sheldon Gilbert on a panel. And Sheldon is now a good friend of mine, and at the time was completely unknown to me, but he was super smart. And I walked up to him afterwards and I was like, excuse me, I'm thinking about starting this company. Can you help me? Can you help to advise me? And just, can I pick your brain? And he was like, yes, absolutely, of course. And, it is that grace that I have always been met with. You talked about community, right? Our community is so gracious. Our community is so magnanimous. Our community is so giving, that's really the only reason I felt like I could walk into this space, because I felt like there were people who had walked before me and people who had helped to pave that path and pave the way for me.
I love that. And so the solution that you came up with, what was the first iteration of Goalsetter?
Yeah, so the first iteration of Goalsetter was, it was a savings account and it was financial education, because those were the two things for me, right? I mean, you talk about your niece, and to me, Amira, I know that every kid comes out of the womb learning how to spend money. I mean, they just know it. It's like...
And not their own money, mind you.
No.
Our money.
Our money.
Yes.
They know absolutely how to hold on to their money like this and how to spend your money like this. It's amazing,
yes.
right? That must be the definition of like right-handed versus left-handed, which hand they're holding on to their money with, right?
Yep.
So yeah, every kid comes out with that knowledge, but they don't come out with the knowledge of, how do I save money and why is that important? Teach me these concepts of financial education in a way that connects with me and in a way that, I will get. And so I thought those are the first two things that are the most important. But then, when I launched Goalsetter, what I started to see was debit cards were being introduced for kids. And I realized that I had to have a debit card. And so I called up. So one of my competitors was backed by a bank that was issuing kids debit cards, because not every bank would do that at the time.
Yeah.
So I called the same bank and I said, hey, I understand you are issuing debit cards for X, company. I would love for you to issue a debit card for me as well. And the person who I talked to said, have you raised $5 million yet?
Oh.
And I said, no, I haven't. And he said, okay, well, we won't issue debit cards for you if you haven't raised $5 million, and no one else will either.
Well, first of all, speak for yourself. I didn't ask you all those.
I didn't ask you all that,
okay.
right? I didn't ask you all that. But the fact that you told me all that tells me that you wanted me to stay out this space.
Yeah.
Because, that was your boy who you were protecting.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't want anyone entering the same space that your boy was in, right? And that's what this space is, right?
Yeah.
Let us not get it twisted. It's what entrepreneurship is.
Yep.
It's what fintech is, right? It is a lot of, my boy is here and I've created a moat around him, and I will actively work to keep you out of the space. Not only will I not invite you in, I will actively work to keep you out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that was my first big aha of, oh, wow, I'm not welcome here, right? But, we kept going. And so, when you talk about community and when you talk about networks, right? One of the things that I realized is you can't be an entrepreneur without a network.
Absolutely
You
not.
absolutely cannot be. And so I went and I found someone who had worked for a fintech company before and who had connected several different banks to the fintech company that he worked at. So he had all of these connections. So he said, oh, I can call this bank, or I can call this bank, or I can call this bank. We'll find a way.
Without the $5 million raised.
Without the $5 million raised. And we did.
I love that.
And we did. Right. And so, so much as, here we are sitting in New York City the day after the Knicks just had that incredible win, came back.
OG.
Shout out to OG. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. Where's the OG jerseys? I mean, Brunson, you're dope, but like today,
Yep.
I'm sure those OG jerseys are flying off the shelves. So, but you know, one of the things that he said was, this game is about a game of runs. It's a game of runs. And San Antonio, they got their first run early, but if you don't give up, you'll have your run, right? And that's a big part of being an entrepreneur too. You have to realize that this entrepreneurial journey is a game of runs. And sometimes you're going to have a bad streak, a bad run, and sometimes you will have a very good run. And you just have to be tenacious and keep going.
100%. The mentality is everything at the end of the day. And I was talking to our head of engineering today, and he was like, but the Spurs are a better team. I was like, you can't say the Spurs are a better team just because physically they might be better and they might be better shooters. I'm like, the Knicks are mentally a stronger team.
That's right.
And that rings true, again, to being an entrepreneur. Like, tons of people might be smarter than me or might have more access to capital and all of those things. But like, do they have that drive and that hustle and that mentality that I'm not going to lose?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
And so what is the business model like when it comes to Goalsetter? Is it an app where people are, logging in and they're able to invest and then they have their access to their debit card? Talk me through like the actual business model and how that works.
So our initial iteration of the product was a kid's banking app, as we talked about. So it had a savings account, it had a debit card, it had an investment account, and it had financial education. And the thing that made us so different and so unique in the market is that we offered financial education. And for me, that was a requirement, right? As a Black woman, I felt guilty for just putting debit cards into kids' hands. I don't think that's a responsible thing to do, right? I mean, we talked about your niece. Who wants your niece running around with a debit card and no financial education?
Amazon does. They want her to do that.
Exactly. Who wants her out there, right? But her mother doesn't, and her auntie doesn't, and her uncle doesn't, and her father doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it was really important that we made financial education an integral part of their experience with the debit card. And so we came up with innovative features like Learn Before You Burn. On Sunday morning, your kid's debit card would automatically freeze if she hadn't taken her financial education quiz for the week yet. And the minute she took the quiz, boom, the card would unfreeze again. No one was thinking like that, right? Because everyone else was just trying to get a debit card and as many debit cards as they could into kids' hands. And so, I say that because I think it is so important to have Black female founders because we bring a different set of spices to the gumbo, right? Like we bring a different sauce into the mix. And in so many instances, it's a sauce that includes love and caring and community building and enrichment and growth and all of these things that our community needs. And so many other people don't see it in our community, right? They see our community as, how many debit cards can I get into those hands? Because those folks are the ones who are going to make me rich, right? And so so that's what we did with our first product. But what we found was that, our competitors, we raised $30 million, and that was an incredible feat for a Black woman-owned fintech.
Absolutely.
Right? Incredible. But our competitors raised $800 million.
Oh.
And so it becomes really difficult to compete when the year you raise an $8 million seed round, which is like unheard of. Huge. They spend $8 million on a Super Bowl ad in one day, right? So my $8 million has to last me 18 months and I have to prove traction and I have to do all the things. And they spend $8 million on a Super Bowl ad in one day. And so we said, you know what, we're not going to be able to compete in this space. We're not going to be direct to consumer. We're going to shift and pivot. And we are really going to lean into financial education in the B2B space. And so we've started providing financial education to middle schools, to high schools, to colleges, to financial institutions who want to get access to the next generation, right? Because let's be clear, if you are, we did a survey at the University of Pennsylvania, the Wharton School, And so these are all MBA students. And we asked them, how many of you made one of these mistakes in your undergraduate years? How many of you opened up a credit card and didn't know the interest rate, didn't pay that credit card back on time, took out a loan for someone or co-signed for someone, took out too much debt for your undergraduate loans, right? We asked them, how many of you made these mistakes? 86% of Wharton students said they made at least one financially limiting mistake in their undergraduate years.
Wow.
And so when we think about those numbers and we think about all these financial institutions that are trying to get to the next generation, we know that there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to provide them with, our new tagline is not just financial education, financial activation. And so we provide them with the financial education, but then we walk them down the path of, now, what do I do with that knowledge? You know about a high yield savings account? Great. Let's get you into one.
Yep.
You know about investing? Great. Let's have you start. And so that's where we are now, and that's what our business model is. We go to financial institutions that want to get to that next generation, and so we help them to sponsor Goalsetter at colleges, universities, high schools, wherever they want to be. We go to those educational institutions and say, hey, educational institution, if you'd like to pay for yourself and for your own students, you can and should do so, right? And when I say you can and should do so, college is more expensive than ever before, and so many of these kids are coming out of college and they don't have a way to pay back their college loans. Financial education is the least that we should be responsible for doing for these kids as a university and as a society. And so yes, we are working with all kinds of institutions to provide really engaging and impactful financial education.
Absolutely, especially when it comes to college, because I remember getting a letter from my school maybe a few months after I graduated, and they were like, donate to X, Y, and Z. Donate? You didn't even ask if I had a job. You didn't help me get one. I'm like, donate money?
Are you kidding?
I couldn't believe it. I donated, but I donated to the African American Studies Department.
Yeah, there's a brick at Stanford outside of the Black House.
Yeah,
name on
exactly.
it.
I said it goes to them directly though. And I said, I'm gonna check that box off.
That's right.
But I was just like, I couldn't believe that y'all are asking me for money. And I wish I had something like Goalsetter when I was in college.
Yes.
I would have loved that.
Yes. Listen, we did something with UC Berkeley, and 86% of the students said that they understood their student loan better because they went through the Goalsetter curriculum. We launched at Winston-Salem State University, and 86% of those students said that they were more prone to open an account and start investing because they went through the Goalsetter curriculum. So that's the kind of impact we're having, which, for me it's why I do the work, right? I mean, I could work anywhere and go back to collecting that paycheck and collecting those bonus checks. And, wait a minute, this is sounding a little too good. Maybe I should stop talking about it. But yes, I could go anywhere and do those things. But it is this impact that as we look across the nation, financial education is on the lips of everyone. But who is doing it for our kids in the way that we are doing it and in a way that is transforming their lives?
And was there a specific moment where you felt like, oh, this is my purpose and this is going to work out? Like, was there a piece of traction that you got in those early stages of building this where it was like, I know why I'm doing this?
Wow, that's such a great question. I think it goes back to us talking about there are runs, right? And so there are so many of those moments where you get that feeling of a high because you're like, I see it, right? So when we launched the Goalsetter app initially, I went and spoke at an event in Utah, and a woman walked up. There were a number of people who were waiting in line to speak to me. And this one woman was just incredibly patient. She was waiting like 20 minutes. I felt so bad by the time I actually got to her. And I was like, I'm so sorry. And she said, no, don't worry about it. I just had to let you know that you have changed my son's life. And I said, how? And she said, my son was horrible with money. He spent every dime that he had. And then I got him on the Goalsetter app, and he started taking your weekly financial education quizzes. He now has $3,600 saved after a year. He's opened up a dog walking business. He is saving every dime that he gets from birthdays and holidays. And I told him that I would match however much he has by the time he turns 16. And he said he's going to aim to have $15,000 by then because he wants me to buy him a Tesla. She said, I don't know if that's going to happen, but you completely transformed his relationship with money. And when she said that, right, I was like, oh, wow, right, this works.
Yeah.
Pairing financial education with this debit card that has so much power, right? We all know every kid wants a debit card. It means independence. It means their ability to spend on their own,
Yes.
All of those things. But if you say, no, you can't use that unless you're learning these key concepts, then you are completely transforming their relationship with that card in a really positive way. So I think that was one of the stories, but there have been so many more. I mean, recently at a school where we launched Goalsetter, we were having our end of the year celebration, and a mom came up to me and said, my son didn't even know about financial careers until he started to learn about the financial education concepts through Goalsetter. And now he wants to be a corporate finance attorney. But he didn't know. He became interested in finance through you. And then that helped him to think about the careers that were available to him. And she said, and for my family, we didn't know anything about credit scores and how important credit scores were in our lives until he came home and told us. And so now my husband and I are really trying to clean up our credit so we can become homeowners.
So you're helping the whole family.
Honey.
Helping the whole family out.
And so those are the moments, right, where you say, yes, this is hard, but we are changing lives. And, that's what it's all about.
I love that. And when you say we, I know you are a solo founder. Tell me a little bit about that and how you were able to grow the team to make this magic happen.
Yeah, I am a solo founder. And I heard you talk about one of your confessions to your investors earlier. And so I have to tell you that I applied to ERA, which is an accelerator here in New York City. And they said they didn't take solo founders.
Yep.
And so I called up my girlfriend, Nalady, shout out to Nalady, who went to Stanford with me. And she was working with me on Goalsetter at the time, right? She is South African. And so she had a team that she was working with because she did a lot of consulting overseas. So she had a team in India who was helping me to build the MVP. So she was working on the product, but I was like, Nalady, you got to act like you're the co-founder because I need to get into this accelerator program. And they said no solo founders. So come on.
Listen.
Okay.
Sheree did the same thing. She just told this story on the podcast saying that she did the same thing with her CTO.
Shut up.
Yep.
Hilarious.
Yep.
Yeah. So there we go. I'm sure they were like, well, why do you have 99% of the equity and the lady has 1% of the equity?
Nice question. She said you need a co-founder. Here she is.
Okay. Here she is. Isn't she lovely? Isn't she wonderful?
Mm-hmm.
So but once I actually started to walk this path on my own, being a solo founder is really hard. And it's what I tell people all the time. Don't do it if you can avoid it.
I'm a solo founder and I say the same thing.
Do not do it if you can avoid it, right? But it was, it is particularly difficult finding a tech co-founder because they can go to Google and make $1 gazillion. So why are they going to come to your little startup where you can barely pay them and have no idea whether or not you'll be able to pay them in the future? And so that was a really difficult journey for me. And so, but I have an extraordinary team of people, right? Our head of tech right now, he was formerly at BlackRock. Our head of education, she was a New York City public school teacher, but then also developed curriculum, and she's just extraordinary and amazing. So we have really great people on our team. And how were we able to find those people? We were able to find those people truly because we were living and walking in the mission and talking about the mission all the time. And so people came to Goalsetter, yes, because of the, hey, it's a startup and this is great and I can get equity and hopefully this equity can turn into something great. But they came to Goalsetter because they were of like minds and like hearts, and really want to see this world be different for all of the children that we're serving.
That you need to have people who are aligned with the mission.
Absolutely.
Because they can, like you said, get paid way more doing way less somewhere else. So if
Absolutely.
they're not really focused on the mission, it's going to be hard.
Absolutely.
And so let's get into fundraising.
Yeah.
Before you started raising VC funding, how did you fund the business? Like, I know you mentioned you joined the MVP and you were going to banks that hadn't raised the 5 yet. So that initial startup capital, was that money you just injected into the business?
So initially, I did inject the first, probably $20,000, $30,000 into the business. And then I realized, oh my gosh, it's going to take much more than this to create a fintech MVP. And I started to ask myself, where do I have networks and communities of people who will be willing to invest? Now, what's interesting about when I started Goalsetter, it was 10 years ago. In 2016, people were not writing angel checks if they were not already in the angel ecosystem. So my entire network had come from large corporations, and my bosses and my peers had plenty of money, but they were not writing angel checks. Those two worlds did not collide.
Yep.
And that was primarily my network, right? This large corporate network. And so then I realized, well, you know what? The only other people I know who have money and who might write a check to support me are the Stanford Black alumni. And Stanford Black Alumni Association has a meeting every 2 years, and it happened to be coming up. And I was like, let me make sure I get myself to that meeting. And so I got myself to the meeting, and There was a panel that was talking about how do we support Black undergraduates who want to go into tech because they're at Stanford. There are plenty of other people going into tech. How do we make sure we have a support structure and a funding structure for these Black undergraduates? And so at the end of the panel, they had 2 mics up and said, we're going to take questions at the end of the panel. So I wormed my way over to one of the mics. I made sure I was the very first one right in front so I could get my question answered. And they called on me, and instead of a question, I pitched.
Wow. Okay.
And so that was my first public pitch, and that's where I raised my first capital.
That's amazing. So people came up to you afterwards and were like, hey, I'm interested. Like, let's make it happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The power of having strong alumni with these schools. I know I actually said I wanted to skip school and just become an entrepreneur. I told my dad that. And I said, just give me whatever money you were going to give me to go to school and I'll do that. I'm so glad he didn't. Because
I'm so glad he didn't.
That money would have been down the drain.
Okay. And then you would not have had a plan B.
And I would not have had a plan B. So, but even just thinking about that, and I'm hoping people who are watching can think about that, is like, I know, it looks sexy to be an entrepreneur now and to be a founder and just to go into it, but like having access to the next Fortune 500 company CEOs and all, it's so important.
Absolutely. And particularly as a Black founder, because, as a Black founder, as you know, it is really difficult. I mean, those first checks, they come from your close network.
Yep.
And if we don't have a close network of wealthy white people, where else do you go? And so that was a really important part of my early fundraising journey. Now, after that, then I got into the accelerator program. Then I started to go to pitch competitions. Then I started to connect with women-led angel groups, right? And those became sources for me of getting checks early on. But in order to, those early angel checks, in order to get started, that has to come from your close network typically.
That family and friends round.
That family and friends round, that's right.
And so how much did you raise before you actually went out and just got venture capital funding?
So I raised about $1.2 million before I went out.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you hit the $1 million mark before you actually even raised institutional.
I did. And that was a bunch of $25,000 checks.
Wow. Oh, your cap table looks crazy.
It's a nightmare. You don't even want to see it. You do not even want to see it. Yes.
Ooh. Ooh,
Yeah.
okay.
It was a lot of hustle. It was a bunch of, and you would hit the jackpot if, you went and pitched to a small group of people and 4 people came in at
Yeah.
$25,000 each. And then I remember one time I pitched to 4 people and I was like, yes, the meeting went very well. I was like 25,000 each. This is going to be 100. And they were like, okay, we'd like to split up the 25,000 between us. I was like,
all right, man.
Okay, you know what?
Never mind. Like, just keep it. Y'all need it more than I do.
Listen, exactly. I'm about to go to Chick-fil-A and make myself feel better in this moment.
And so when did you know it was time to raise venture capital funding? And why did you choose venture capital funding over anything else?
I actually did not raise venture capital funding from venture capitalists. I raised mostly from strategics.
Okay.
Because what I found was venture capitalists didn't understand the vision and the need for what I was building, but strategics did, right? When I would go to strategics and talk to them, I would talk about the fact that you need to engage this next generation or you're not going to have any customers in 10 years and 20 years, right? You need to regenerate your customer base, but you need to do that today by serving the whole family. And they got that. And so the majority of my capital up front, after I did my friends and family round, it came from strategic partners.
And can you explain to the people what a strategic partner looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So a strategic partner is typically a corporation that is that has venture dollars and they do investments, but they do investments that are going to potentially benefit their business. Not just benefit their business in terms of, hey, this business will blow up and we'll make a pretty penny. Benefit their business in terms of, hey, this is a problem we need to solve or a problem that we've been thinking about and can't solve internally. And we think this company could help to come up with a solution. We could use their solution, or at some point, we may even buy this company. And so we got banks that were interested in investing in Goalsetter because they certainly realized that they didn't have a great solution for kids and they needed a great solution for kids. We had insurance companies who invested in Goalsetter for the very same reason. Insurance companies are often selling family-based solutions. And if you're selling a family-based solution but are not speaking to the moms or the kids, you're missing an important chunk and an important piece of that. So yeah, we had a number of strategics who invested in us.
And you had some celebrities invest in you too.
We did.
You had the Chris Pauls, you have these Carmelo Anthony, these big NBA players. How does that help?
Oh, well, that absolutely helps because just as you could see with the celebrities that showed up at the Knicks game last night, right?
Yep.
That's when, color starts to become something that is a superpower for us as opposed to a detriment for us, right? So, everyone loves a celebrity. No one cares what color that celebrity is.
Yep.
And so my ability to get those folks on my cap table, I knew that they invested in me largely because they saw that I was a Black woman who cared deeply about our community and was coming up with a solution that was different than everything else in the ecosystem. I remember when I talked to one of their investment funds, they said, hey, your competitors have already pitched us. And we said no. And we said no because we believe that all they're trying to do is what they always do with the fintech products in our community, take advantage of our community, right? But we believe that your product is different and we believe that you're different. And so we're going to say yes to you. And that was everything, right? That was everything to understand that someone saw that we were a differentiated model, we were a differentiated product, and we were having impact. That was really important to me. But it was also important, as you indicated, to our fundraising journey, because all of a sudden when people saw that those celebrities had invested in Goalsetter, we became the cool kids on the block.
Yep, that definitely helps. And you got the money. How does that change the business?
Wow. So we got the money and we, really invested in that fintech app that I've talked to you about. But when we realized that we had to sunset that app because we didn't have enough money to compete in that ecosystem, we had to pivot. And when you have money that money doesn't last forever. That money only lasts as long as either the time that it takes you to become profitable or the time that it takes you to get enough traction to attract other people to invest in you again, right? And so, our pivot has meant that we've got to run fast and hard at one of those two lanes. And that's where we are now. But we are seeing an incredible amount of excitement and traction. Everywhere you turn, someone is talking about financial literacy, whether it's, a municipality or it's a school or it's, the entire borrower ecosystem for college loans, as we've talked about, has dramatically changed. So financial education is really a dire need, and particularly in this economy. People are struggling and people need financial education more than ever before. So we think that we are in the right place at the right moment in time and just working it out.
All right, Tanya, we're going to close the podcast episode out with a lightning round. So questions under 10 seconds, just whatever's on the top of your tongue. So if someone could only make one financial investment that could help pay for their children's future college tuition, what would you recommend?
Find a place where houses are undervalued right now and buy a home that is going to dramatically increase in value. And the reason I say that is, I look at my friends who had houses in Martha's Vineyard that they bought 7 years ago, cost $800,000 then. They're over $2 million now, right? They're not making more land or more property in the United States. And so, there are always values and deals to be had and opportunities to build wealth to send these kids to college, which is really expensive.
I like that. Okay. What's the worst financial advice you've ever been given?
The worst financial advice I've ever been given is no financial advice at all.
Okay.
Which left me to my own devices. And I was like your 11-year-old niece.
And what's one financial habit everyone should start this week?
Going through your budget and taking everything out of your budget that is not necessary and that doesn't bring you joy, right? You've got needs, you've got wants, but some of your wants are going to deliver you 10% joy. Some of your wants are going to deliver you 90% joy. Take all those wants out that are only 10% joy items so that, you're stuck with just your needs and the ones that are really impactful to you. And then that frees up way more of your check to invest because we all have to be building wealth as much as we possibly can.
Yes. And last one, what's the most delusional thing that you believed early on that helped you win?
The most delusional thing I believed was that starting a company would be easy. I had all of the tools, right? I was smart. I was capable. I had been entrepreneurial inside of larger corporations. I had these Stanford engineering degrees, and so people would give me credit for knowing that I knew what I was doing. And so I thought that it would be as easy of a path as my corporate career was for me. And that there was nothing further from the truth than that.
I know that. So thank you so much for joining us, Tanya. This has been an amazing conversation. I've learned a lot. I'm going to send this episode directly to my niece as soon as it comes out. Tell everyone how they can support Goalsetter, where they can follow you, anything that you want to promote.
Absolutely. You can find us at Goalsetter Co. And please reach out if there's anyone you know who needs financial education, not your niece, but your school system, your college, your corporation. Please reach out. We're happy to work with them.
Amazing. And thank you all for tuning in to another episode of The First 200, where we are documenting the lives and journeys of the first 200 Black women to have raised over $1 million in venture capital in the U.S. If you want to follow us, make sure to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at First 200. That's first spelled out 200. And then you can check out our index, our upcoming report, and some events on our website, thefirst200.com. Until next time, thanks.